We'll ask John McMullen from 97.3 ESPN.com. He was at the Carson Wentz press conference today, and the Rookies Report, we'll get a full report from the NovaCare Center today as John joins us now on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. John, the Rookies Report today, I thought Carson Wentz, they said he had, only in Philadelphia, right? They give you mock press conferences where people are firing questions off at you. So he seemed prepared today. I thought he did a pretty good job. A couple things stood out, though. He said he has not talked to Sam Bradford. I guess the number one question is, does it matter that those two have not spoken? Do you think it's going to be an awkward situation? Should Sam have reached out to Carson and said, "Hey, buddy, look, I understand I'm a little I was upset, but don't worry about it. We'll be fine together."
I think it'll be a little awkward at first, but just at first. And that first quarterback room meeting will probably people will be on edge a little bit, and then it'll calm down from there and move forward. But it's no surprise that Sam hasn't reached out to him, obviously, with what went on. And I think in a lot of ways it's not that important because the guy who was brought in here because he knows the offense backwards and forward and knows everything Doug Peterson wants and is more in tune to trying to develop Carson Wentz is probably Chase Daniel because he's the guy who's supposed to be the tutor. So I think their relationship is probably more important when you think about it for Doug Peterson's offense, and I think obviously they'll get along fine. But Sam, he's not happy. And Mark Sanchez texted Paxton Lynch, and Sam didn't text Carson Wentz, and I'm not surprised by that. But I don't think you make a lot out of it.
Yeah, and, Carson Wentz said all the right things today, though, didn't he, John? He expects to have a great relationship with Bradford, and he's looking forward to competing, and there's going to be all the quarterbacks in the room. It should be really good.
Yeah, I mean, he's really, really good at just a natural at handling the media and doing those types of things. And dating back from the first time when he was drafted and introduced to us, he was tremendous with the microphone, and he said all the right things, and he said it's similar to Sam, and that the fact that he's got to do what he can do for his career, and Carson Wentz has to do what's best for him moving forward. Everybody's got to be a professional, and that's pretty much all he could say, and that continues to be the line he will take, and I assume will stick with moving forward. It's just, as I said, it's an awkward situation at first, and Tuesday is going to be awkward for Sam Bradford, and I think the entire organization. And once you get through that, I think everything slows down at least a little bit.
Yeah, and this was just rookie camp today. I don't know if you guys had access to go watch anything, but Wentz is probably the main guy out there getting the snaps and doing stuff in today's setting, right?
Yeah, I mean, remember, it's just the rookies, the tryout players, and there are about 3 or 4 first-year players like Malcolm Bunch and Brett Boyko, but none of the veterans are allowed to partake. We got to see individual drills, but it was obviously it's raining and it was indoors, so you have the short field, and but, the most interesting thing to me is Everett Golson is in town for a tryout, the ex-Notre Dame quarterback, and those were the two guys, Carson Wentz and Everett Golson, and I just kind of chuckled when you think about the Notre Dame quarterback versus the North Dakota State quarterback, and it's the North Dakota State quarterback who's the star.
I found this to be interesting. I see a video posted from Phil Sheridan over at ESPN.com. Carson Wentz takes the first snap of rookie camp from third-round pick Isaac Seumalo. So is he a guy that they may be looking at to play some center?
Well, he's got versatility, and he has played center, but remember, you don't have your guys there, so he's one of the few people there that can actually play the position. So I wouldn't read too much into that. It's just that you have a very limited crew because, as I said, there's no veterans, there's no Jason Kelsey, there's no Josh Andrews. So other people that could handle that particular issue weren't there today and able to do it. Seumalo could, but there's no question in his long-term, they're going to start him out at guard. And if he wins the starting job at left guard, obviously he settles in there. If he's going to be a backup, though, you have to have versatility, and he's got to be able to play both guard positions and center.
Yeah.
And he does have a history with that in college.
So Carson Wentz today, he said he doesn't anticipate tension with Sam Bradford, but should the Eagles expect some tension about the manner that they signed Carson Wentz, John? What do you know about the possibility that the Eagles might have broken some rules in getting that deal done?
No, if you're talking about the offset language.
Right. Apparently, they negotiated that prior to the draft, and I guess the rules state that you can only talk to a player about contractual stuff if you're the number 1 pick trying to get a deal done, not if you're the number 2 pick.
Yeah, that's true, and I think the Eagles reportedly asked that of both Jared Goff and Carson Wentz just in case if they would be okay with offset language. And that's one of those.
Can you
things
give us
like
a little? John? Can you give a little insight to the listeners on what this offset language means? It's a relatively new thing. I know Mariota had it last year, but what exactly is this offset language that these rookies' contracts now have?
It basically means you can't double dip. So in essence, if you're a failure in your first contract, and say Carson Wentz is cut by the Eagles in year 3, which tells you how meaningless this is at the end of the day, because that's not going to happen. But if it does, and he signs with another team, in the past, if you don't have offset language, the Eagles are still responsible for the money in the contract, plus you would get the extra money from your new team. Now, with the offset language in there, any contract you sign with a new team would be taken off what the Eagles owed you. So every team wants it in there. It's particularly meaningless with the number 1 or number 2 overall pick. And that's why with Marcus Mariota, you mentioned last year, he kind of held out. You don't even have holdouts now with the rookie salary cap and everything slated. He didn't sign for a long time because of this offset language, and it's meaningless for a number 2 overall pick because there's no way they're going to give up on you. So that was when you're in the Wentz or Mariota level of draft choices, arguing about that is really just general manager and an agent having a you-know-what match, because it's really meaningless in many, many ways for that. Now, as you fall later in the draft, even later in the first round, we saw it with Bjorn Werner, who was cut by the Colts this year, didn't reach his rookie contract. If he didn't have offset language in his deal, that means he can double dip when he signs with Jacksonville.
Yeah, now the NFL has declined to comment on the situation, and it's very unclear whether they're actually going to do anything about this. So there's not a whole heck of a lot of information out there, but as John did comment on, that both Goff and Wentz agreed, they both got verbal commitments that they would accept this offset language in their contracts here. So now Wentz is in camp and the other rookies are in there. And, what are some of the other things about the Wentz press conference today? Because he was asked about being a leader. How are you a leader if you're not going to be on the field? And those answers were some things that I thought were kind of interesting. What were some of the questions and answers that stood out for you?
Well, I think when you think about this was his 3rd press conference before actually stepping on the football field, there's not much he could add already than he has. And I think a lot of it was going over the same type of stuff. And one of those things was the fact, how are you a leader if you're not the starting quarterback of the team? And the basic answer to that is you can't be. You're not, and you won't be. But that kind of stuff takes care of itself once he takes control of the team. And he talked about his philosophy of just getting to know the guys, learning things that way, and getting accepted in that way before you go over the actual huddle. And then the leadership part comes in at that particular position because it demands it by the very nature of playing quarterback. So whether it's Sam Bradford, whether it's Daniel, whether it's Carson Wentz, you're the leader of the football team. It's just a matter of how well you do it And I think, by the way, Carson carries himself. That part of it I'm not concerned about at all because I think people will follow him. He just has that nature about him that when he enters a room, he kind of takes it over.
Which kind of adds to the intrigue of, well, how long can they keep this guy out for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the plan. I really don't. There's so much pressure, and you can have all the good intentions in the world, and I think the Eagles do. And as we sit here in mid-May, basically, their mentality is they don't want him to play this year. And I believe that, and I think they believe it. But once you get in the season, we always bring up the Jacksonville Jaguars and Blake Bortles, who had the same plan. And it lasted 3 weeks. He was starting in week 4. So basically a month they were able to hold out. Now, the Eagles have a better option as a bridge. Sam Bradford over Chad Henne. I think Sam has the advantage there. There's no question about it. But if Sam plays like he did last year, up and down, some good moments, some bad moments, there's going to be a ton of pressure for this organization to just say, you know what, let's speed this up. If Carson Wentz is the end game, we might as well start now, especially if we're not going to be able to compete with the Dallas Cowboys or the Washington Redskins. What's the point? Because quarterback is a position where you have to be on the field to learn. One of the great things of the old world, Mike, if people remember that, and even arena football, when Kurt Warner sort of got his career started in that level, is repetition. To play that position, you have to be on the field and learning. I don't know how much you can do sitting on the bench, especially behind a guy like Sam Bradford, who isn't exactly Brett Favre, if you want to make the Favre-Rodgers comparison.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. Phil Sheridan wrote an interesting piece, John, this morning at ESPN.com about Sam Bradford being the flaw in the Eagles' plan. And he's basically insinuating, look, they had a flawless offseason. They did a great job of addressing needs in free agency. They signed or re-signed some of their own guys, except for the Bradford part. Do you think if they knew they had the second pick that they would just bring Daniels in, let him be the Peterson, and then move on? Or do you think they would still have brought Bradford back here?
No, I think if they had the second overall pick and they knew they were going to be able to get Carson Wentz, they wouldn't have re-signed Sam Bradford. I think they did not believe that they would be able to move up and get the guy they wanted. And by the way, I also include Jared Goff because I don't think they wanted Jared Goff, to tell you the truth. I think they wanted Carson Wentz, and that was the one player they targeted. And there was a lot of disappointment in that organization when the Rams traded up to number 1, because when that happened, everyone assumed Los Angeles was going up to get Carson Wentz. And I think it stopped right there for the Eagles. If the Rams didn't change their thought process and go towards Goff, I think the Eagles stay at number 8, and we're in a totally different situation here. They only moved up to get the guy they wanted, and they didn't think it was going to be a possibility when they started this whole thing at number 13 overall. And you need somebody to play the position, and I think that's where the short-term contract of Sam Bradford comes from.
Hey, John was there today at Eagles camp. The rookies out there, we mentioned Isaac Seumalo, and he was the third-round pick. And who are some of the other intriguing rookies this weekend? You mentioned Everett Golston as a wild card guy, but who are some of the other guys? I like the story of Jalen Mills. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. Who are some for you that you got a chance to see today?
Well, the most interesting part was Jalen saying he's going to start at corner, which surprised me.
Oh, you mean start out at corner, not be the starter at corner?
No, not the starter. Start out his NFL career.
I was going to say, that's a bold statement there.
Not out of here. Obviously, the starters aren't even here, but the fact that he's going to be started at the cornerback position is a little bit of a surprise, because obviously he was a safety most people who followed the draft, rated him as a safety and projected him as a safety at the next level. So that's interesting, and I think that's one of those spots that's a concern for the Eagles because there's not a lot of definitives there in the fact that, we expect Eric Rowe to be a starter. I think Nolan Carroll and Leotis McKelvin will battle for that other spot. Maybe the loser is the nickelback, but there isn't a lot of depth. There isn't a lot of proven talent. And there's a guy, a lot of people said talent-wise he's a third-round pick, but he had some off-the-field issues, which he also explained in detail. I don't know if people are going to be completely happy with it, but we'll see how that shakes out. And also, we've talked about in the past, Wendell Smallwood spoke today, and he's going to get every opportunity to get significant carries in the backfield, and he's looking forward to it, and I think he's going to hit the ground running and be force-fed because the team needs some significant help for Ryan Matthews in the backfield, and he's going to get opportunity to be that guy.
That's interesting about Mills because the piece that I wrote at 97.3ESPN.com about 5 guys, and I said that he played both nickel and safety and that he could get some time as the Eagles nickelback here because I guess that's a wide-open spot at this point, right? Do you have a guy, John, penciled in? And we know, we talk about nickelback, that guy's on the field a lot.
Yeah, that guy's basically a starter in today's NFL more than your third linebacker because you're a nickel more often than not in the NFL nowadays with all the spread offenses. And it's going to be interesting because last year, obviously Malcolm Jenkins handled it, and he did a very good job doing so. And it's Jim Schwartz can go in that direction. He knows he's got a very good, capable player at a Pro Bowl level who can do it if he wants. But judging from what Jim Schwartz has done in the past in his defenses, he's not going to want a safety moving down into the slot and the nickel. So I believe he's going to keep Jenkins at safety the entire time, and that opens up the spot at nickel. And again, you look at the veterans first, and probably the loser of the McKelvin-Nolan Carroll battle for a starting quarter would fit right in that nickelback spot. But there's a lot of guys, and it starts with, as you mentioned, Jalen Mills. Blake Callis, the 6th-round pick, has experience in the nickel. Ja'Cory Shepherd, who tore his ACL and was the original plan in the nickel last year, he'll be back. So there's a lot of bodies they have to sort of sort through to figure out that position.
Yeah, and Blake Callis is another guy, and I mentioned in that piece that if Mills doesn't get the starting nod as the nickel, he might. And this goes back to Mills, where he was a 7th-round pick, number 233. Scott Wright of Draft Countdown had him ranked as his 63rd best player, a 2nd-round grade, John. So Mills is a guy to definitely keep your eye on. Countess, as you just mentioned. But how about I'd like to get your thoughts, too, and Alec McAllister, the freak athlete from Florida, seeing him in person, 6'6", 240 pounds.
Yeah, he's really rangy, and you could see if he sort of puts on a little more weight and develops and gets some sort of NFL functional football strength, you could see him turning into a big-time edge rusher, and I think that's what the Eagles project. But he's so slight right now, it's hard to imagine him being anything more than a sort of a one-trick pony that you might use in a sub-package to get after the quarterback because I don't see how he's going to hold up in run support to be out there all that often. But it's a guy, when you're that low in the draft in the 6th round, you sort of look for maybe a prospect with one special trait, get him into your program, maybe spends a year on the practice squad, back end of the roster, not active, and he's got a year in the weight room, and all of a sudden, maybe year 2, you have something. I think that's the plan with McAllister, but he certainly he's got tremendous size when you talk about a pass rusher and what they like with long arms and the ability to get around the corner. He can certainly do that.
John McMullen has more on the Eagles rookies reporting today. They'll be there through Sunday, and then Eagles OTAs begin on Tuesday. That's when everybody is expected to be there except for Fletcher Cox. No change on Fletcher, right? He will not be there.
No, I would not imagine. It would be a big surprise, and if he does, the Eagles and he will be very happy because they'll probably have a new contract near $100 million with $50 million guaranteed. So I don't expect he'll be there on Tuesday, nor does anyone else. And as I said, it's not that important, to be blatantly honest. And for a player of that level who can kind of just come in training camp and hit the ground running and be fine. And I know it's a double standard. We've talked about it with the upset and people being upset with Sam Bradford, but you do have to realize there is a difference between the positions, and one demands leadership and one doesn't, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. The Sayamala, you mentioned about him being the only guy there that has some center experience. Is he going to be, in your thoughts, in the left guard mix, the right guard? Well, I guess Brooks is the right guard. So is this going to be like do they got like four guys all trying out for left? I mean, you got Sayamala, you've got... I
think you got more than that. You got Alan Barber, you got...
Josh Andrews?
Wisniewski. No, I don't think Josh will be in the mix. I think Andrew Gardner will be back and get a chance. He won the right guard spot before getting a Liz Frank injury in his foot. I think he'll be given an opportunity. Malcolm Bunch, who was on the practice squad last year, I think he'll get an opportunity. But I think Isaac Sayamalu, I think that's the guy they want to win the job, and he'll get every opportunity to do so come training camp, and we'll see how it shakes out. The one good thing is they have a lot more depth this season, and if he's not capable of doing it, you can lean on Wisniewski and even Alan Barber again. So they do have a lot of options at the position, and the competition alone should make things a little bit better there at that particular position than it was last year.
Plenty more on rookie camp all throughout the weekend. Go to 973ESPN.com and follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. Were you surprised, John, as I was a little surprised that the Thunder closed it out last night?
No, they were playing at such a high level, and I think you got to give Billy Donovan a lot of credit for what he was able to do and turn it on the defensive end. And it's just the young legs kind of overwhelmed the Spurs. We just assume they're never getting old, but all of a sudden Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker looked very, very old against Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, and that's because they are. And once you get in these 7-game series and all of a sudden the tide starts to turn, maybe a few heads start to go down, you feel sorry for yourself, even a great team like the Spurs, and then all of a sudden the snowball gets rolling down the hill, and that's kind of what you saw in Game 6. That's a really good team, and I think people don't recognize it because of the Warriors and what they were able to do, and the Spurs. The Thunder are tremendously talented. You got two Hall of Fame level players. You really do. And I don't think I've ever seen a guard with the floor speed of Russell Westbrook. John Wall's close, but
Iverson.
Iverson's close, but I think the game has changed from when Iverson was there because obviously Allen was so undersized, and the fact that even in that era, which isn't very far gone, you could beat him up, and he got beat up a ton. And you really can't do that in today's NBA. So you can imagine the advantage a player like Westbrook has when he can't take a shot, a hip check, sort of a hard foul. That's gone in the NBA, and he's really, really flourishing.
Thunder, fourth conference finals appearance in 6 years. John McMullen, a longtime NBA writer as well, with his NBA thoughts there. And the NBA tonight, it's Miami and Toronto. It's been an awful series, but we'll see if they can get that one to 7 maybe. We'll see. All right, John, enjoy the rookies this weekend.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.